Hey everybody. We're going to do a little sifting today because I don't know if you were following along with my previous videos, but some of my bins are getting very wet and thus they're very hard to sift any amounts out of. This one wasn't too bad. I got a fair amount out of it. I got a couple more I got to work on too. So yeah, there's a really juvenile style worm. And another one. They seem to like get up on this paper and I'm just gonna leave them alone. Blank paper. Bubble wrap. Let's call it bubble wrap. This is paper. So there's some worms in that, but it's going back in, so I'm not even gonna panic about it. So I just want to get some more castings out of here. Trying to prepare a little bit more for spring. I'm going to need the castings and I'm going to need the room because when I get busier in the spring, here's a worm party going on right here. When I get busier in the spring, in another month or so, I'm not going to be sifting and doing as much. I'm still going to feed the worms and stuff. Just not going to have the time to do all the sifting videos and all that stuff along the way, so I'm trying to get ahead of the game a little bit. So here we're just going to skim off this coarser stuff. And throw it to the back. Just the worms seem to push it out. They're pretty happy. I mean, I don't see smiles on their faces or nothing. Let's be realistic. I just think they're very content type of worms because they seem to be well dispersed throughout the bin. They seem to be working well, doing what they're supposed to do, and they are really consuming a lot of feed. So I'm just going to take off the top part first, like all of what I can just pull off the top, because that's the driest and nicest so far. And we're just going to work our way along that and see where we get to on this. I know this bin's going to be easier to sift than the two little bins that I've got. And then, as always, my overs just go to the back. So the moisture is really high in my bins since I've gone to the 2-week apart feeding, and I guess I've been coming in and messing with them every week still anyways, but my moisture is really, really high. Higher than I normally keep it. And it's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. Just, it makes it more difficult to sift your castings out. And so I'm coming at that from a different angle and doing this more often, taking more castings off, less castings off more often, in order to harvest the castings and get it out of the bin so that I got space. And you know, as you replace the bedding and stuff, when you're doing this, the worms really seem to jump ahead. The hatches the hatch seems to get more, you get more of a flush, I guess, after you harvest some of the castings and give them some new bedding. And so I'm just skimming along, taking the very top. But I mean, I'm not going to get, I guess I shouldn't say I'm not going to get lots of castings out this time. I don't know what I'm going to get, but I'm not going to get the volume I would if it was drier and I could go deeper. They feel good, nice and moist. And I don't know if you've ever felt castings, especially right out of your worm bin. Some people will have because they're playing with worms just like I am. But others that haven't, it's a real, it feels like the best potting soil or potting dirt or whatever that you could possibly get. It just feels great. So as I'm doing this, I'm taking the top down and I can see the worms, tails of the worms in there, and they're heading, when I skim this off, there's worms here, and by the time I come back over, lots of them dive down. It's almost like doing the light method in when I'm taking the worms for a reset. It's pretty much the same thing. They're going away from the light and they're working their way down, and that gives me another little bit to skim off. There's a grape stick or vine. Those take forever to break down. Corn cob. There's worms here. They're heading there for the bottom. So it works pretty good. And I know I'm not going to get out as much because it's so moist. I'm just going to have to do it more often for now and just keep taking it off top and then fluffing it all up. And I was talking to Hunter about it being too wet to sift, and he did say, he says, you probably are going to have to leave them opened up, take the plastic off of them so they can breathe and get some dry them down. And I have to think I'm getting to that point where I'm going to have to do something like that with a couple of my smaller bins. We're gonna play a little bit on my smaller bins today too. A couple of them I've got, and they're very wet, like very, very, very wet. But when it's wet like this, if you take less, you'll get more through the screen, right? It doesn't ball up as much on the screen when you put less in the screen. That's part of the learning curve too, is less is more. When you're dealing with wet castings, put less in your screen, you'll get better results. It's really getting down into the really wet stuff. I've probably taken about an inch off this area here, and it really is starting to seem like that's about all I'm going to get, because it's muddy now. So that's what we're going to get out of that. Now we're going to mix this thing up. There's a Chiquita banana peeling label. So let's do a mix. Let's get this stuff turned up because it really is very muddy. There's a lot of worms in here. There is a lot of worms in here. That's just... And remember, this is the castings end. The feed zone's at the other end. Seen a lot of big cocoons too. This bin's really producing. Hunter was asking how many thousands of worms I thought he had in one of his bins, and I said, oh, maybe 3,000 or so, maybe 4, 5. He says, I think there's more like 10. That's how deceiving it is. You know, maybe I've got more in here than I think too. Because there's a load of worms in here. But I'm going to go on the conservative side all of the time, and I'm going to say, I got a couple. There's some worms. They're busy. All sizes. You know, I'm no expert on worms, but I know I had some Indian blues come in with my first batch of worms. I know I had a mass exodus of worms when I got my first batch of worms, and I'm pretty sure that was the Indian blues heading for places unknown. When I turn these up and I look at them now, I really don't see what I would classify or even question to be Indian blues. Okay, so here's a potato. Now we're getting to the feed zone, right? So we're just going to put the feed zone back down, but I am going to continue stirring up the bedding and the worms to give them more air, to make them, help them dry up a little bit so I can maybe get more sifting done. But now, there's worms, man. There's lots of worms, people, in this bin. So much fun to see this type of activity in something that started from 250 worms. And they're right to the back. So as you can see, I've got quite a bit of room back here. I'm just going to try to scooch them all. They'll find their way back to the castings and to the bedding. And this is how I'm going to leave them for now. I'm going to cover them back up with paper. I think I'm going to leave the plastic off this end to help them dry, but I am going to put paper on it so that things can continue working. I mean, I don't want to completely screw up their system, right? So we'll just put this guy up here. There's a bunch of worms in here. I don't want them to fall off, so I'm going to grab them. Edges of paper are getting tethered. When you get tethered paper, and the paper starts getting used up, it's usually like the young and the baby worms. I don't know what it is, but they really go after paper. I'm going to do this, put a good thick piece of paper over top of the casting zone. We're going to do that. And then when it comes to the plastic, I'm only going to cover this end tightly. I am not going to cover this end tightly with plastic because it's muddy. This stuff is so muddy, and I'm not used to that, and I'm sure the worms don't care for the reproductive and the activity level. But what the part I care about is I need to sift stuff out of them. And in order to do that, the moisture content has to be right. So that's what I'm going to do with that bin. Set you up on the bed. Okay. Let's try that. So, too close. Well, give it a whirl. So the last time I left this end open in order to try to dry them down a little bit more. And the paper on top is drier. Skim that back. All right. Yeah, we might have got a little bit of dry down. We're not going to get much out of this, but we'll take what we can. Because these smaller bins, they're getting really quite full. And I'll be honest with you, there comes a time you have to take something out of them. No matter how much or how little, they're some very small worms. You got to get something out to make some room. And it's quite wet. But that's okay. We get out what we can. Like out of what I put in there, I'd probably say, I don't know if we got 25% off of through the bottom. A lot of it's just staying on top, coming up. We're not going to get much out of here. This is way too wet. Look, it's mud. It really is. It's just mud. See, too wet. But yeah, I just don't think it's worth it. We got to get this bin dried down. So let's stir it up. It's a very active bin. There's a really good amount of worms in it. And this one's all from the fruits of my labor. This is my first brooder bin from my breeder bins. So I guess I had about three breeder bins, dumps, or maybe 4, put into here of the cocoons, and this is the results. It's a very active bin. So we're gonna give it the turn and hopefully dry it up a little bit. Yeah, you need to dry down. Okay, so we're gonna take this and we're literally only gonna put it over this end. This end's gonna stay more exposed. And when I say that, this is gonna be completely exposed and it's gonna have the ability to have air get underneath because it's not tight. You got to get some action going on drying this down because it's just too wet. So we did the same thing here. Last time we left this part open here. And the paper is drier on the very surface. There's a plant. I don't know what kind of plant, but it is a plant. Oh, completely missed. Good thing I had my sheet down. Oh, make a mess every time, it seems like. All right. See what we can do with some of this. Yep, about the same story. Still way too wet. But take what's at the top, put it through, put it back. But all we're going to get out of it, turn it up, like it's just mucky. Stir it. Gotta stir it. Need some air into there. It's no longer even crumbling. It's sticking. There's no crumble. It's really too wet. In the castings mode of things, it's mud. Worm stuck to my hands, but that's okay. Now, if my bins that are starting are this wet, I don't mind. You know, young bins. But when you're trying to get castings out, this is too wet. So I think we're gonna leave that open and just put the cover on like that. We've got to get this stuff to start drying down. All right. That's as far as I'm taking it. I'm not worried about it. My worms are not in danger. I'll work through the problem I have about sifting. It's not game-changing or ending. We just got to do some different things to get stuff to dry down and mix it up and fluff it up and basically change the moisture in our bin, moisture level in these bins to something that we can work with, because it's right now it's so wet we can't work with it. And this has been a couple of weeks now that I've been starting to play with different scenarios, and I think I have to start actively trying to leave them more exposed so that we get more air to them and dry them down. Because what happens with castings is they keep moisture, they hold on to moisture. It's part of their properties, they hold moisture in, and where my castings are more rich in my bins, it's just mud. We'll work through it. If you like what we're doing, if you like worm videos, subscribe, share, whatnot. I did put a video up yesterday, I guess it was, about a product review that I had bought myself, a chamber vacuum for my kitchen. If that interests you, go check it out. Look me up, check it out. Pretty cool little tool to tell you the truth in a kitchen. I think it's gonna pay for itself in no time with saving more food. And yeah, like, subscribe, hit the notification button. That's checking the cast, doing some castings here this week, February 25th of 2024. Talk to you later. Have a great one. Bye.